Welcome to Trois-Rivieres, the most dramatic street race in North America.
Trois-Rivieres, a tough little French-Canadian circuit. Climb aboard, let's go have a little fun.
We are heading down the home stretch of the inaugural Grand Am Series, and championships are at stake.
It's coming up next on Speed Vision.
Not far from the banks of the mighty St. Lawrence River lies the oldest continually used temporary racing circuit in North America, the Circuit Trois-Rivieres, site of the 8th round of the debut series for the Grand American Road Racing Series, the Grand Prix de Trois-Rivieres. Hello and welcome everyone, or should I say bienvenue. I'm Bob Varsha, along with David Hobbs, John Bizignano, and Calvin Fish will be joining us from the pit lane. Of course, you can't mention racing in Canada without evoking the memory of the patron spirit of Canadian racing drivers, the late Gilles Villeneuve, a Formula One star who grew up not far from Trois-Rivieres, went on to glory with the Ferrari team, winning 6 Formula One Grand Prix races before he was tragically killed in a practice crash at Zolder, Belgium in May of 1982.
Of course, just 15 years later, his son Jacques Villeneuve was to go and win the World Championship in a Williams. And of course, Gilles Villeneuve, a very, very flamboyant driver, no doubt about it. His son, not quite as flamboyant, but actually more effective than his dad, who was certainly a hero. And some of his early wins were right here at Trois-Rivieres.
They've been racing on these streets since 1967. World of Champions is sprinkled with many of the greatest names in the sport. Here's Calvin Fish with one of them.
Whenever racing returns to Trois-Rivieres, thoughts are immediately with the late Gilles Villeneuve. In fact, this weekend, he made the front pages of the newspaper. And the driver inside this photo with him is none other than his old sparring partner, Elliott Forbes Robinson. Elliott, coming back here, stars have certainly changed. We all have a little less here these days. But coming back to Canada, you must have fond memories.
Well, it is. We spent a lot of time with Gilles and his 2 kids. They were the same age as mine, so we camped together. And Trois-Rivieres has been one of my favorites forever. We ran back here with Alan Jones, with K.K. Rosberg as a teammate, with Bobby Rahal, and had some fabulous races and had such great memories that to be back here is special for me.
Did you imagine that almost a quarter of a century later that you'll come back as a double sports car champion and in contention for the win here today?
No, actually I didn't. I thought I'd be long gone out of racing by now, but you know, I'm having so much fun at it, Calvin, that it's great to be here.
Well, Elliott has 3 wins at this track, and to score his 4th today, he starts 6th. He has a lot of ground to get to the front of the pack. But on the front row of the grid today, we have the drivers who sit 1 and 2 in the championship. For more on that story, let's go down to John Bizignano.
Didier Taze relied on the nimbleness of his Ferrari chassis and the power of his V10 4-liter race motor to collect his 3rd pole position so far this year. The car was able to turn into the corners very well and get great grip coming out of the slower corners and that great speed down the straightaways. Didier, I think you surprised yourself a little bit on the performance of the car.
Yeah, the chassis worked very well around this course, and I'm very pleased with the performance. And when we came here, we were a little bit anxious, but we're going to see now it's a long race, and hopefully the car will end up that way.
Well, one person who's no stranger whatsoever to the front row of these grids, of course, is James Weaver getting on the helmet. James, what about that V8 torque? You were saying that this is a squirt-type track. Point the car, squirt the engine, and off you go.
Yeah, absolutely. The Ford's got bags of torque. The problem is getting it on the ground, but we're very confident with the new Goodyear rear compounds we're running, and I think when the race settles down, we may have a slight advantage.
Well, one problem that every street circuit brings up is the drivetrain. They take an awful lot of punishment around these city streets. Calvin Fish has more on that.
That's right, Biz. In fact, all of the drivers in the field are very concerned that attrition may play a pivotal role in this championship. Starting from the GTU pole for the 4th consecutive race is the number 81 Porsche, driven by championship leader Mike Fitzgerald and Darren Lauren. Darren, this weekend, this racetrack has already given you guys problems.
Yeah, we had a problem in practice. I was driving and coming around a corner, we broke a left rear trailing arm right in the middle of the corner. And it was all I could do to keep it off the wall in practice. So the track's taken its toll already.
These guys have a game plan, but they're going to be looking for that number 50 BMW when Andy Pilgrim gets behind the wheel. That car has ABS. That's a real decisive factor around this very tight, very twisty, and very bumpy Trois-Rivieres circuit.
Thanks, Calvin. And in addition to all of that, there is very little runoff at many of the corners around this 1.5-mile circuit. The field is now formed up on the starting grid. The Let's now introduce the winners of our Informix Wave Fast Award for top qualifying in their classes. Third pole for Didier Tays and the Doran Lista team, although one of those came at Road America, where qualifying was rained out. Sixth pole for Larry Oberto and the Archangel Motorsports team in Sports Racer 2. The fifth for Terry Borcheller in GTO. The fifth pole for Mike Fitzgerald as well in GTU. And the very first for our American GT pole sitter, John Chevy Levy. Now, in the past, we've talked to drivers about setup and the track. This time, we decided to go to the men behind the scenes.
Biggest problems here are traction. Biggest problem is traction. A lot of wheel spin. We put all the bit of downforce we can on the car, and that's basically it.
Well, we do have a compromise because we're a little bit down on horsepower at the moment with the regulations and the fact that the engine's quite old. So we're losing 15 to 20% on fuel consumption. So we really have to look after that. So that's one compromise. So we compromise a little bit of horsepower there. But we really set the car to come off the turns as quickly as possible, so that we can make the straightaways, the two major straightaways, as quickly as possible. And obviously we compromise a little bit of performance with wheel spin at the moment because we just don't want the car to push.
We've had the fortune of running Trans Am here probably 10, 12 races. We've been coming here since mid-'80s, so we kind of know this track. And it's real critical, power down, power off the corners, and then ride the bumps. This is actually the smoothest. They've done a lot of nice things at the track, so the track's in the best condition it's ever been in. But power down means a little bit softer, so that compromises your high speed, but there's not that much high speed, so you just live with it. But it's real critical. Mechanical grip's extremely critical. Power down.
No question about it. Everyone's going to be scrambling for grip. Of the 10 official turns, 7 of them are 90 degrees or greater. Field is on course. We'll be right back. Grand Am Road Racing is brought to you by Informix Software, Way to Web, and by new 104 Plus Octane Boost with Acceleron Power. Back on the streets of Trois-Rivieres, Quebec, Bob Marsh and David Hobbs, John Visignano and Calvin Fish with you for the Grand Prix de Trois-Rivieres. This is the Boulevard Carmel, one of 2 fast parts of the racetrack. This tight left-hander and another long blast back onto the fairgrounds of the Canadian Exposition. 27 cars in all. Tell us about the track, David.
Well, the track here, Bob, is really very tricky. It's a typical street course, of course, which means it's got crowns. The guardrail's right at the edge of the road. There's no runoffs in any of the corners, hardly. A couple of got a bit on the area. There's 10 turns altogether, so a very tight hairpin. And of course, turn 3, the Port de Plessis, is absolutely unique, and where the drivers have to funnel through a huge arch. I mean, it's only wide enough for one car. And it's an important corner because it's a tight left-hander, and it leads to really quite an uphill straight, so you really want to make some time down there, because turn 6, at the end of that, is where a lot of the overtakes.
Experience will count for everything here at Trois-Rivieres. Now let's take a lap with the G&W Motorsports Porsche.
That was turn 1 we just went through. Here's turn 2. Quite wide, but no run-up area. But and there's the Port de Plessis as we come down to turn 3. Hard brake here. Squeak through there. This is that tight left-hander. No run-up area again on the outside. You've got to make a real good exit because, as you can see, it's uphill here. And this is the longest straight on this racetrack. It's not even straight, but I mean, this is where the overtaking will happen at the end here, coming to turn 6. Quite another tight left-hander. Sun can become a problem here too as the afternoon wears on. As you can see, it's starting to get there. Power going down there. The drivers and the crew chiefs all talking about grip. Being a street circuit, of course, it's got oil and diesel fuel out of buses and all that sort of stuff over this track, so it's very slippery. It gets better as the weekend wears on. Just about when it's real good, these guys put the cars back in the track. There's the hairpin. Slight run down to his blue right. Squeeze down inside here. Right hand sweep here. Then a left hand wiggle there, and then you go across the line. You want to make a good job down this straight too, it's the front straight, because into turn 1, you get some overtaking down as well. A bit of room in turn 1.
Let's look at our Informix starting grid. On the pole, Didier Taze, who says he's surprised to be there. Doran Judd, James Weaver will be alongside, leading the Drivers' Championship in Sports Racer. Claude Bourbonnais, who has vast experience in this racetrack in Atlantic cars and other machines, will be inside row 2, alongside Ralph Kellners in the Ferrari. George Robinson and Jack Baldwin will share inside row 3 the R&S or Riley and Scott Judd powered machine. Elliott Forbes Robinson will be alongside of the second of 2 Dyson Racing sports racers in the field. Here you see a look through the rest of the field. Gary Borchiller in GTO could clinch a tie for the Drivers' Championship in that class with his teammate Ron Johnson. Getting down to that time of year when championships will be clinched. 14 titles in all at stake in this debut season with the Grand American Road Racing Association. We'll have 5 classes of machinery on track at the same time. The big open cockpit sports racers, the lighter, less powerful sports racer 2s, and the production-based machinery, GTO, GTU, and the 2-frame American GT cars, very similar to the SCCA Trans Am machinery that raced here for many years. Now let's get final thoughts from our pit reporters, beginning with Biz.
One thing every driver has mentioned to me that I've talked to is the fact that this track is going to be full of traffic. All the different classes are on the track at the same time. That's an awful lot of speed differential out there on a very tight circuit. Now, one thing is that the slower cars can't just disappear. They can't get offline and into the marbles. In the faster cars, those drivers are going to have to display something that's a little bit of a problem, Calvin Fish, for most drivers. They're going to have to come up with some patience.
Well, it's not only patience with the traffic, Biz, it's also being patient with the equipment. Tires will certainly be a factor. Brakes will definitely be a factor. A lot of the teams have put extra duct work on the bodywork here. You can see on one of the spare nose cones sitting behind pit wall. Lots more ducting, lot more cooling to the brakes. If you don't think this racetrack is tough on drivetrains, have a look and see what was left of Claude Bourbonnais' clutch after qualifying yesterday.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. The safety car is pulling off, and we are ready to go racing. And right now, James Weaver is inching ahead of the pole sitter, Didier Taze, that in part because that Bryant hairpin is a very, very tight corner.
A very tight corner indeed, but of course, as we said earlier, going into turn 1, it's good and wide, so there's going to be some adjusting positioning to go down there. Terrific crowd on hand and a wonderful day for racing. Not a cloud in the sky, a real cloud in the sky here. The field all lining up.
Massive crowd this weekend, as always, in Trois-Rivieres. And now the field has formed up side by side. And we are away. Someone coming down the wall. That is John Field, hoping to make up positions in the first turn. We've got spins. Field has spun. So has Claude Bourbonnais in that blue and yellow machine. And further up the track, Ralph Kellners has looped it in the Ferrari.
Claude Bourbonnais spinning in front of his hometown for the first time for many years. He hasn't done much racing lately. What a shame for him. Field is being led away there by James Weaver, followed closely by Didier Taze, who did not in that pole position. There you see the cars gliding through that gate. Boy, some of these guys are really slow. Didier's still leading.
Taze leading away. He was very surprised to take pole position. That Ferrari chassis, he felt, was not going to perform very well around the bumps of the racetrack. The track has been smooth considerably, as we heard earlier. And that Doran Lista Special, a Ferrari chassis with a 4-liter V10 Judd racing engine in it, took pole position. There's Elliott Forbes Robinson, third car in line, making his way forward. Meanwhile, back to the front, Didier Taze going out the bottom of your picture, followed by James Weaver. Those two in a battle for the Drivers' Championship, while the field strings up behind them. There is Bourbonnais in that Lola Judd, followed by Kellners in the red number 12 Ferrari, if you will.
Both of those spinning at turn 1, very disappointing way to start this race, because as you can see, there's a lot of traffic out there, so getting through this field is not going to be easy now after those early spins. They're making up ground through some of the slower traffic, the AGTs and the GTOs and GPUs. When they get up to the sports race, it's going to be much more difficult for them to make significant ground. Kellners held up there.
Just behind Kellners as they head down to the Port du Plessis is John Field in the machine that may have sparked that three-way spinner down in turn 1. We'll take a closer look at that in just a moment. Right now, all the drama has settled down for a moment. We'll take a break. Welcome back to Trois-Rivieres, Three Rivers. Bob Barsha and David Hobbs with you. Calvin Fish and John Bizignano are patrolling the pit lane. As the race continues, round number 8 of the Grand American Road Racing Association season for the year 2000. The race leader is Didier Tays. Let's take another look at the start as the front runners move away. Watch along the wall on the outside. All of that dust being raised by John Field in his Lola as he comes down the inside.
Yeah, he just tagged Bourbonnais there. He tried to squeeze down the inside of the wall. There really wasn't room. He was in the dust already, so he hadn't got as much grip as he might have needed himself. There you can see the dust in his onboard shot. Just clips Claude Bourbonnais' tail in the Scott Schubert number 8.
Bourbonnais and the Lola Judd off to the right of your picture. You can just get a look there at Ralph Kellner's, the German Ferrari, also went around. Back to the race leaders, already working traffic early in this 92-lap race.
Boy, a lot of traffic there. Back to turn 1 again. James Weaver stalking Didier. Didier with the ball into Judd. There you go, down to the Port de Plessis. You can see just, ooh, wow, Didier locking him all up big time there. A lot of, obviously, a lot of lack of grip there. You can see that by the amount of skid marks on the road going under that. Making a move.
Ooh, now he locks up. We're going to see a lot of that today, I have a feeling. These cars can be very difficult to handle on this slick racing circuit. In fact, before the action got underway, we asked James Weaver what it's like to drive Trois-Rivieres.
It's just tremendously exciting because it's all coming at you quite fast. You know, if you're doing sort of 200 miles an hour on the Bonneville Salt Flats, you don't really get much impression of speed. If you're trying to pull into the parking lot at 200 miles an hour, it's a different story. And really, when you drive on a street track, it's sort of like fighting in the gutter. It's not Marquis of Queensbury. You sort of get the other man down, you jump up and down on him. So you've really got to gorilla the car.
Gorilla
the car. I like that. I always say grab it by the scruff of the neck, and that's what you've got to do. You can see the crown in the road, of course, doesn't help any of the grip anywhere. You roll off the crown, so it doesn't give you a good traction coming out, because it can be very difficult going with the weight jacked across the car as you have that curve in the road. And of course, streets are always much more bumpy than the purpose-built racetrack. And there you can see that down the avenue there, perfectly how the guardrail and the catch fence, I mean, is right to the edge of the road. I mean, there's absolutely no run.
This is the Boulevard du Carmel for the left-hander. So the asphalt also changes to a concrete patch and then back to asphalt again.
The Rue du Carmel leads to the Rue de Calonne. George Robinson car, 74, the Informant car.
Robinson sharing with Jack Baldwin. Baldwin with a couple of victories in that car. One sharing with Herb Hare at Phoenix when the car's owner, George Robinson, was struck down by malaria, picked up on a safari in Africa. Robinson came back and picked up a second victory together, Robinson and Baldwin. They've had mechanical problems now and again since then. Not contended for the championship the way they did early on. There's Elliott Forbes Robinson. Mentioned earlier, 2 victories in Can-Am cars. Ran his first race in the early 70s around Trois-Rivieres. He's also won in a Trans Am car in 1983 and in 1993 in the SECA World Challenge.
So EFR certainly knows his way around the streets of Trois-Rivieres. Beautiful afternoon, sun shining. Good to get later on though, this race draws to a close. Didier Tays making his way through the traffic there.
We'll be back. Stand by for more from Trois-Rivieres. Back at Trois-Rivieres, picking up the Sports Racer 2 battle now. These cars look much like their bigger cousins from the Sports Racer class, but they use V6 engines, no turbocharging allowed. The cars are lighter, more nimble, and we've seen some great racing during the year. There's Larry Oberto. He and teammate Ryan Hampton are the runaway leaders in class, but right now they are looking at the tail of Rich Grupp, sharing with Dennis Spencer in that Mazda Kudzu chassis. It keeps disappearing off the screen just as we get a look at Oberto.
Yeah, he's having a good run on this tight circuit, because the Oberto car this year has been pretty dominant in this class, to say the least.
On a warm day and a slippery racetrack, tires are everything, as Calvin Fish mentioned earlier. Let's get an update from Calvin on what tire compounds are coming into play.
Tire tires will definitely be an issue here today. Most of the teams have opted for a very soft compound. All of the Goodyear runners, the softest compound is the 165. However, James Weaver went for a slightly harder 310 compound on the right side of the car. But one driver who's on 310s all the way around is Claude Bourbonnais. He got involved in the first corner there, but as the tire temperatures come up, he should really be a factor. It looks like he's running strong right now.
In fact, Claude Bourbonnais, and for that matter, those two men, Ralph Kellner's in the red Ferrari and the blue and white Lola of John Field, have worked their way from the back of the pack all the way up to 7th, 8th, and 9th.
Having a very good run through the streets, but they've got to pick their way through this traffic very, very carefully. John Field, of course, who started that or triggered that first lap incident, now looking very anxiously trying to get around Ralph Kellner's on the number 12 Ferrari. Claude Bourbonnais coming up now on the Alberto car. Get a position back, the SR2 cars leading these three much bigger engine cars. Once they get by, of course, they will streak off into the distance. But not that easy to pick them off, especially on these street days here. Alberto closes the door on Kellner, so that gives Bourbonnais a little bit of free room in the 8 car.
Tough place to pass in the best of circumstances here. This must be driving Kellner's and Field crazy.
Absolutely.
As they watch Bourbonnais disappear.
And of course, Kellner's watching the mirror for Field too to make some rash move down the inside somehow. But they both got around Barry Alberto there. So now they've got to get past the 62 cars. And they're not going to be getting much help from these guys, because these guys, Rook and Alberto, are battling furiously for a lead.
Yetes still in the overall lead. James Weaver right there, counting the rivets at the back of that Doran Lista Special.
Now they're right in some very heavy traffic.
This is down to 1. Tays came in trailing Weaver by 13 points for the Drivers' Championship in the Sports Racer Division, so he is hoping that Weaver will disappear sometime soon. It's an opportunity for him to get away a bit. Let's get back down to the pit lane and John Visignano.
One thing indicative to most street circuits, and it's very true here in Three Rivers, is that the bumps on the road can be very damaging to the cars and even wear out the drivers. Also, the crown in the road that comes up by natural traffic every single day causes a problem in selecting the perfect line. So as these drivers go through the field and as they try and gain places, you may see them in somewhat of an unorthodox line through the corners. What they're trying to do is stay off the crown, off the bumps, trying to get as much grip as possible.
All right, thank you, Biz. And of course, that crown is in the road because of rain runoff. It's designed that way.
Yeah, and of course, as the race progresses, a long race like this, with all these guys on very soft tires, they'll be tearing off that rubber and leaving it lying around on the track. So when you come up to lap people later on in the race, it becomes even more critical. You've not only got the bumps and the ground and the road to fight, but you want to pick your way through that roll up rubber too to get real stuff.
There's Eric Messley. He is second in the GTO category. Up ahead of him is Terry Borchiller in the Celine Mustang. And these cars, very quick production-based machinery, have been lapped by the race leaders in the sports racer cars.
It's happened a few more times before the afternoon is out. And it makes it so difficult for these people because they've got their own race going and then the fastest cars come through and they sort of got to try and make room for them, but at the same time they don't want to lose the road space.
There's a look at the top 10. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Trois-Rivieres, about midway between Montreal and Quebec, capital of the province of Quebec. If you've never been to this part of Canada, you really deserve it to yourself to make a trip. Definitely a Gallic European feeling here in North America. Bob Barsha, David Hobbs with you for round number 8 of the Grand Am season for the year 2000, the Grand Prix de Trois-Rivieres. And the GTU battle. Stéphane Villieu, one of a number of Quebecois, Quebec area drivers have come out to take part in this race on the streets of Trois-Rivieres, leading the GTU division of Porsche 911.
He's leading, of course, our pole sitter, Darren Law and Mike Fitzgerald, so he's having a good run. Two Canadian drivers, one from Montreal, one from Toronto. And of course, the faster guys, there comes John Field trying to work his way past these two guys who are dicing furiously for the GTU. Meanwhile, the Ferrari has gone through. It's going through right now.
Last thing Mike Fitzgerald wanted to see was more traffic or a visiting driver, a wild card, if you will, up here in the hunt for the race victory. Fitzgerald leads the GTU driver category over his teammate Darren Law by 16 points coming in. So a victory here would go a long way toward locking up that inaugural GTU driver title for Mike Fitzgerald. As that battle continues, let's get down to the pit lane and Calvin Fish.
Mike Fitzgerald not only leads the GTU Championship, but he currently leads the Porsche Cup standings. Now, that's points given to anyone driving a Porsche in any competition around the world. Now, there's only ever been 2 Americans win this award before. Bryce Cobb and last year, Kurt Wagner, when he won 2 championships. Now, the bonus for winning this, 275 grand. So you know that there's a lot of inspiration there for Mike Fitzgerald to try and carry this through to the end of the season.
The Porsche Cup given annually to worldwide Porsche drivers in ceremonies around the Christmas holiday in Stuttgart, Germany, has gone to a number of Americans over the years. Nicole Bryce Cobb winning it a couple of times back in the late 1980s.
It's a great place to go to that. I came 4th one year in the Porsche Cup and I met with Patrick, who was a winner up there. 50 cars run around, BMWs.
That's the Genesis Racing BMW for Rick Fairbanks and Andy Pilgrim. They were the pole sitters in that category. They were actually outrun on the racetrack by Kevin Buckler in a Porsche, but Buckler failed a post-qualifying fuel inspection. Thus, the BMW was elevated to pole position. Let's take another look.
Looks like he's dragging the side behind now, spins down, and this is coming to turn 6.
Boy, couldn't wind up in a worse place.
Now on that concrete patch, a bad spot for him to hold other traffic up, and it's not very wide there, as you can see.
Is back underway. Meanwhile, there goes the GTO leading car. Here comes the number 50. Fairbanks at the control. Now back to the front. Didier Tays with a couple of car lengths for breathing space over James Weaver behind him.
I'm surprised, quite honestly, that the Judd Howard car has been so successful holding the Ford engine car off. The Ford has got a lot more grunt, there's no doubt about it. Around here, you want grunt more finesse, there's no doubt about it. But maybe the Ferrari chassis is a little bit better over the bumps. But of course, the Ryan Scott chassis, like the Gary Bruder drivers, are renowned for very high downforce. Real classic place for high downforce.
Riley and Scott's and the Judd. There is another combination. The Riley and Scott chassis in the hands of George Robinson with the Judd 4-liter V10. We're used to seeing close competition in the sports racer class this year on the Grand Am Trail, despite the fact that there are just 8 cars entered. In the previous 7 rounds of the championship this year, we saw 7 different driver lineups come through to take the top step on the podium. Several drivers were repeat winners, and 7 different combinations of drivers from 3 different teams have won races thus far this season.
So a lot of, there's a car parked in a dodgy spot right under those trees in the shadow, so a little bit difficult to pick out. And of course, again, with the street lined by the guardrail, absolutely nowhere to go for it. George Robinson now pulling in on EFR in the number 20 car.
They have lost 3rd place to Elliott Ward Robinson, who has now moved into that spot, dropping Robinson back to 4th. Maybe some problems with that car. We saw the crew talking to each other, looking a little animated, listening on the radio, scratching their heads just a little bit perhaps. Full course caution. Double yellow flags from the flag stand. I'm guessing it's for that car parked on the backstretch.
We certainly haven't seen it. Yes, there it is.
Now that's the number 55 car. That is the sister car to the 50 that we saw spin earlier. This one shared by Chris Gleason, Pennsylvania, and Jeff Altenberg, veteran SCCA champion from Baltimore, Maryland. Tough break for them. We are under a full course caution. Take this opportunity for a break and be right back. Tays leading the race. Welcome back to Trois-Rivieres and the Grand Prix de Trois-Rivieres. We're under a full course caution while the number 55 GTU BMW M3 of Chris Gleason and Jeff Altenberg is towed to a safe position. That will allow the field to close up behind the safety car. This means a lot of hard work will have gone for naught. Then again, Didier Tays had very little lead over James Weaver to begin with. Let's get down to the pit lane now and Calvin Fish.
This full course caution may have happened a little too soon to really see drivers pit right now. To get points in the championship, you need to do 25% of the race distance. That's about 23 laps. We're about lap 19 now, so ideally they'd have liked to have seen this yellow in about 5 laps' time.
Well, Calvin, you can't have everything perfectly. It will help people like John Field there, third car in a row, and the Ralph Keller's Ferrari. These guys had those spins early on, so to bring them just a little bit closer to the DHAs.
Terry Borchiller, who continues to lead the GTO class, hoping to lock up a championship today. Let's get back down to the pit lane now, and John Bizignano. Biz?
George Robinson has brought the 74 car into the pits. They show that there's a low voltage reading inside the car. They have had 2 batteries ready to go. They're going to check number 1, the wiring from the motor to the battery, and if that's okay, they're just going to put in 2 more batteries. Of course, this can only last about every 20 laps. They would have to come in and change batteries. The motor will not develop any significant power whatsoever without proper voltage.
And that would suggest a Duff alternator.
Yeah.
That is a much tougher fix on these cars. Here's the 09 American GT leader, Doug Gode. He's fighting for a championship as well, but he needs points to come from behind, along with his teammate Craig Conway in the Spirit of Daytona Mitsubishi. Going to work on that car, taking advantage of the opportunity to fuel up, check the rubber. Meanwhile, the field continues to circulate, and around a 1.5 mile circuit, he could lose a lap in a big hurry. Now let's get back down to the pit lane. Calvin Fish has something for us again.
The 09 machine, the leader in American GT, it looks like there's a problem with the left rear. I saw a lot of smoke coming out of there, maybe a wheel bearing, wheel seal, something like that. Team are going to work. They topped him up with fuel. Meanwhile, they just tighten the wheel back up, and they're going to let him back down and continue, but you still see some smoke emanating from that left rear corner, guys.
Guess they're just going to have to ride this one out. There are 2 points-paying rounds of the championship remaining for each of the classes. It includes a 100-kilometer or 62-mile sprint race at Watkins Glen, New York, followed the next day by a revival of the 6 hours of Watkins Glen. So there'll be 2 very different racing disciplines on display on the last racing weekend of this debut season for the Grand Am.
Well, they certainly will. That's the 55 car, the one that brought the caution flag out in the first place, stopped on the straight. And back to pit lane, having a look to see what they can do with that.
While the field is coming around, we expect a green flag this time by Didier Tazen. Look at James Weaver right up on his gearbox. He's going to try to time this perfectly to catch Taze right at the green flag. We'll see if it works. Green is out. Nope, couldn't get it done.
A lot of action going to turn 1 here as everybody jostles for position. Of course, these guys are now on cold tyres after those pace laps. But the tyres were hot when they started the pace laps, so they pick up all that debris and rubbers like that. So for the first couple of laps after, look at that. The first couple of laps, the tyres were after caution.
Saw that squirm from the Doran Lista special. We'll take a break. Stand by. Welcome back to the streets of Trois-Rivieres, Quebec. Bob Marsh and David Hobbs with you, and James Weaver remains glued to the back of Didier Taze's race-leading Doran Lista special. As they rocket down the Boulevard du Carmel once again, headed toward turn 6. This time Weaver tries the outside again, but once again, he cannot do it. They swing onto the backstretch. Taze fighting to get the power down with the Riley and Scott of Weaver all over him. Here's John Bizignano.
In talking with James Weaver's team, they said that the only real frustration that James had in the car was all the lap traffic, and this yellow flag allows him to get right up behind Didier Taze. He thinks the car is faster than Taze's car, and right now both of them are well out front. They should have a good 5, maybe 6 laps before they get back in traffic. Let's see what Weaver can do with it.
Well, it's a good point that he has been able to get close to him, and he has got a clear track, so he's going to get by him. Now's as good an opportunity as any, but we just saw when they went up to turn 6 a couple laps ago how difficult it is to get around anybody on this track, especially someone like DHA.
We just picked up a shot of Mike Fitzgerald there coming back on from turn 6. That's where the number 50 BMW spun earlier. Let's go on board now on videotape and see what happened to Fitzgerald as he went down into the corner.
fella was on the outside
Yeah,
of him.
exactly.
Struggling around to find a gap between himself and the wall.
Overcooked the corner. Got in a little too fast, probably to outrun that car we saw on the right. Oh, this is going to take a long time. The old three-point turn from your driver's test.
Absolutely. Again, demonstrating just how tight this circuit is.
While back to the point. Weaver again all over the back of Taze. Now keep in mind, as Calvin Fish mentioned earlier, both of these cars will knit to change drivers. The question is, when do we do it? Especially if we don't get another yellow flag, because drivers have to spend a minimum of time in the car. 23 laps is the number, in order to earn championship points in endurance racing.
Well, we're now up to about lap 27, but of course James lots of more up there as we go into that turn 6. There is the traffic. Now again, I think James Weaver, that Ford engine, just a little bit more grunt. Even in the traffic, it's probably as good a chance as going to get. When Didier gets held up at all, James Weaver's car should have just that little bit more off the floor.
We heard James Weaver's crew chief, Pat Smith, say basically the setup is pretty simple for Trois-Rivieres. Just throw all of the downforce at the car that you can.
That's all you can do around here, because there are no significant straights. Admittedly, at the end of that straight, if the one overtakes the body for turn 6, but you probably do better coming onto that corner, onto that straight, better than you would actually picking up speed down the hill, go down to the bridge again. It's always just fascinating. Coming out of the tyres of Didier Taze. These guys now are getting ready for that tyre stop. Both of them must have a lot of flat spots on those tyres.
Neither of these cars pitted during the yellow flag. So there'll be important action coming up in the pits. Speaking of the pits, here's Calvin.
Well, fuel economy here is definitely a factor for the Fords. They can make it on one stop, bearing in mind that we may see some caution, of course, but there's a difference of strategy between the number 20 and the number 16. The number 16 car with Weaver behind the wheel is 5-speeding, meaning they're using low gear through some of the tight corners. EFR and John Paul Jr. in the 20 car, they're only 4-speeding. It should make them a little better on fuel efficiency. James said he'd try to counter that by maybe short-shifting at low RPM in 3rd, 4th and 5th gear to try and get that fuel back.
Certainly interesting to see how it goes on. Of course, all those theories get completely thrown out the window if you do have any sort of caution creation, especially
Traffic ahead for Didier Taze. James Weaver right there. Elliott Forbes Robinson, the car he is sharing with John Paul Jr., are currently 3rd. That's the number 20 machine from Dyson Racing. In addition to the Drivers' Championships, there are also manufacturers and team championships at stake in the Grand Am. Now, one of the things that the Dyson Racing team has done that I thought was interesting was, although both cars are Ford-powered, they chose to badge one of their cars as a Lincoln at the Rolex 24 Hours of Daytona to open the season. That has divided manufacturer championship points between Ford and Lincoln. We'll regret that before the season is over. If it costs them a title, we'll take a break and return to Trois-Rivieres. Stay with us. Welcome back to Trois-Rivieres, or Three Rivers. Actually, there aren't three, there are only 2 rivers, the Saint-Maurice and the Saint-Laurent. A passel of islands where the 2 rivers meet caused early explorers to think what they were looking at was the joining of 3 rivers, and they just stuck. Speaking of stuck, Didier Taze with the red and white number 27, Doran Lista Special, almost stuck it up the back of that lapped GT car. James Weaver bears down on it from behind.
He lost a bit of momentum too when he got stuck behind that car. James Weaver looking down the outside, inside rather, now he looks down the outside. He'll go around that turn 6. A lot of wheel spin as they come up there.
Drag race off the corner. Taze slides across to give James Weaver something to think about. And this has been going on since the green flag. Wow! Taze is off. Weaver has a shot down the inside and takes the lead.
Taze went wide there, coming out of that little slight left-hand kink. Got it on the gravel, and James Weaver shot down the inside. Great move there by Weaver. Really took advantage, because you've got to do that. That's why he hounded him. Gorilla him, he called him.
Well, earlier we heard from the pits that James Weaver was calling in, saying he thought he had the faster car if he could just get by. Well, now he is by Taze and pulling away. Here's another look.
gets it wide there, up over the curve, onto that asphalt. Loses it 5 minutes.
David, I can remember when that corner was grass just beyond the curve. You and I used to come here with the Atlantic Series. It's been paved over now, and Didier Tays is probably glad of it after that.
Yes, now the thing is that James Weaver was so close to Didier that he probably had got a quicker car. It's just getting around him. It's going to be interesting to see if he can put significant daylight between himself and Didier between now and the pit stop.
James Weaver getting the back end, stepping out. He is definitely trying hard.
Early on in the year, the Judd did have a definite fuel advantage. I'm not sure they have got that fuel advantage now. You know, a few races ago, Didier could have been saying, well, it doesn't matter, because James is going to have to stop long before I do, and I'm going to be able to do some good laps then, but I don't think he might apply this weekend.
At the mid-season race, the July 4th Trois-Rivieres 250 at Daytona Beach, Florida, I spoke with Jack Baldwin, who also uses Judd power in his Riley and Scott, and he said, no, don't let the Ford guys fool you. They've been working really hard on their mileage, and they're doing a lot better at it now.
As you can see, James Weaver was right. He's pulled out a couple of seconds there in just a couple of laps.
Now, word from the pits is that John Field is going to be penalized for that first turn incident. Here's Calvin.
Intersport Racing and Oliver Gavin look at the monitors carefully. They realize that when John Field does pit, he will get a 10-second stop and go. Now, the fuel window for this Judd-powered car is massive. After lap 17, they said they could bring him in and go the rest of the way, but realized if they do that, they're really going to put a big stretch on those tires to keep Oliver out there to the checkered flags. They're going to wait a little bit longer. They expect if they see another caution, they'll then wait for it to go back to green flag racing, because they cannot do the stop and go under caution.
Their valuable track time. There is John Field from Dublin, Ohio. Lola Ford making his way around. Will he pit this time by? No, he does not. Back to the pit lane and John Bizignano.
Well, they've made the necessary repairs to the 80 car. They found that it was an oil line that came adrift. Now remember, 2 weeks ago in Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin, this car was heavily damaged in the rear end. In fact, the entire rear end of the car has been rebuilt from the doors on back. One problem they were having was getting this oil cooler and the lines to it to fit just right. They spent a lot of time on it Friday, and obviously a problem showed up with it again during the race.
Problems for the Porsche GT3R of Michael Schramm and John Morton, another man with an Elliott Forbes Robinson type career.
Absolutely, but John Morton has raced everything, everywhere, and won at most places. Well, I don't think he's actually won here.
80 cars suffered from a fire. There's another one that's been burned this year. Our GTO leader, Celine Allen Speed Lab. Take a break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Trois-Rivieres, Quebec. Bob Barsha, David Hobbs, Calvin Fish, and John Bizignano with you. A moment ago, we were talking about our GTO leader, Terry Borchiller, in search of a championship today here at Trois-Rivieres in the Celine Mustang. The right front corner of that car, you see damage. All of the walls, the Armco, and the traffic here at Trois-Rivieres. You can imagine how easy that would be to happen. Now down to the pit lane, Calvin Fish and Ross Bentley.
Ross, it seems like Didier's dropping the pace a little bit. James got by him and he's dropped back. Do you think it's a tire problem right now?
I don't think so. I think it's really just a matter of traffic. It just looks like it's, you know, you get lucky sometimes and sometimes you don't. James got by him, and I think Didier's just got a little unlucky one lap. We'll get it back.
Canadian, but you've only raced here one time, and that was back about 15, 20 years ago, right?
Yeah, I can't say I know this place really well, but it's an awesome event. I mean, the spectators here are just probably some of the best in North America. It's a really cool event.
Mean a lot to Ross Bentley if he can score his first victory here at Trois-Rivieres here today in the Grand Am Series.
Nothing better than winning at home. Yete sharing with Ross Bentley. There's a pit stop coming up in which Bentley will have his shot at this 1.5 mile Trois-Rivieres circuit.
Ross Bentley doesn't look old enough to be racing here.
To the Fort Duplessis trademark. Trois-Rivieres. They've been racing since 1967. This continually used temporary circuit in North America. And the crowd turns out in support of this race. Here estimates that as many as 100,000 fans will come through the turnstiles during the 3 days of this event.
Well, of course, it is right downtown. I mean, it's absolutely perfectly placed. And it's a great park, there's plenty of parking.
Easy circuit to walk around. To the right of your screen there is a hippodrome, a horse racing track. It's the other side of the wall to the left of your screen. And this first turn they're coming down to is also known as the Stade turn. Stade in French, of course, means stadium. Behind that wall in the background, you can just see the light stanchions from a baseball park. It's housed minor league baseball for many years. Forchiller leading the GTO class in the Mustang. Just behind is Rich Grubb, that Mazda-powered kudzu chassis. Battle in the Sports Racer 2 category. Just behind that is the race leader, James Weaver, coming up fast. There you see him, just giving a wave to some of the cars that gave up to allow him through.
So now he's putting some daylight between himself and DATs. Judd engine car, despite what Ross Bentley said. I think the car of James Weaver is quicker, and it's certainly going to be quicker in traffic situations because he can just jump by these slower cars. Because you don't have much opportunity to get by some of these cars, like the 62 car, the SR in the SR2 class, will be very quick through the corners, almost as quick as the bigger car. Can't carry the downforce, obviously, because they've got the power to pull it, but still and all, very quick.
Interesting year for this team. Rich Grubb, Dennis Spencer, they had a big crash at Lime Rock. Calvin Fish has more on their situation.
The number 62 car, currently leading SR2, gets a bit of a break with the kudzu chassis in terms of tires. They're able to run a slightly wider tire than the Lolas, so that would mean around here be a little better under braking, certainly better traction coming off the corners, and that Mazda is making great power, and certainly their time is due. They've struggled all year, they've finally got it together. They didn't take the pole, they had a sticking throttle in qualifying, but certainly coming good in the race today.
That kudzu chassis comes from Jim Downing's shops in Atlanta, Georgia. The father of what was known as the Camel Lights class in the old days of the International Motorsports Association Camel GT Series. Downing, a big proponent of Mazda rotary power, but the kudzu chassis will take other power plants. Great customer car. We'll be right back. Trois-Rivieres, pit stops coming quickly now. This is the GTU class leading number 88 Porsche 993 Super Cup car, being shared this weekend by Stefan Vernieu and Robert Juhani. Change taking place. Notice they have to raise the hood in order to get to the fuel tank. Normally the Porsches are fueled right through that body. Well, out on the racetrack, this is the 09 American GT class leader, Doug Goad.
Smoking. Smoking out the left rear wheel out there. Now, he had a problem early on with that wheel rubbing, didn't he?
Doesn't seem to be slowing him down much as he motors away from the GTU Porsche, Mike Fitzgerald. Now, number 5 Celine Mustang is in the pits. John Bizignano awaits.
Well, the BAS Mustang has come around the corner. There's definitely some damage to the right front of the car. It's definitely been up against the wall. All the aerodynamics there are pushed into the body, and a big tire mark right underneath the headlight. Of course, the Forchiller is getting out of the car. They've practiced this driver's change all weekend long. They definitely know what they're doing when it comes to a driver change, but my gosh, they want this thing to go very, very smoothly. All 4 tires, right side tires, are coming off the car. Fuel has gone in the car. The fuel went in very quickly, actually. A little bit of problem with the driver's net. They're trying to pull some of the plastic off of the headlight. Right now it looks like just a bit of an extended stop for the number 5, Celine.
Thank you, John. Now, I've mentioned several times that Terry Borchiller and the man who's taken over the car, Ron Johnson, can clinch a tie for the Drivers' Championship here at Trois-Rivieres. That can be broken in the season's final weekend at Watkins Glen coming up in a few weeks' time.
You see the number 10 car, which is now second in the GTO class. Not that far behind Ron Johnson now, because he's got to stop.
This Ford Mustang is being shared by Jocelyn Hebert and Pierre Barriel. That Speed Vision visor decal leads me to believe that it's a Speed Vision Cup car. Racing GTO, I'm not quite sure. Passed by John Field there. A little smoke out the back of that Mustang as well.
Yeah, there's a little bit of smoke coming out the back. good. John Field speaking up in the distance there.
Oh,
Yellow flag.
Yellow flags. Down at the Ford Duplessis.
Oh,
Field
it
is off. Into the
dear.
tire barrier. It's major damage at the rear. It's certainly been an eventful day for John Field. Let's take another look here.
You must have just see it disappearing from view there. Oh my gosh, yeah, spun right under the bridge there. It is very slippery on there. There you get an idea of the slope of the road too. Just the absolute sheer slope of that road. It's on a bit of a hill. You've got the crown of the road, so it makes it very tricky coming in.
Cleaning up that mess. As you see the damage out the back of that Lola.
Oh dear, no. It looks like their day is effectively ended.
After that big first corner spin in the stadium corner, then the 10-second stop and go penalty for the incident. Now this. Forbes Robinson on the number 20. Here comes Claude Bourbonnais, one of the other cars that spun with Field in that first lap, first corner incident. Bourbonnais on his way. He'll have a pit stop somewhere in his near future.
Field obviously got one in his immediate future. Going on that car looked at. It looks a little bit too deranged to me. That so I don't know if those wires and things hanging out the back. Just be able to
Ralph Kellner is pitting the Ferrari just behind him. Watch out for that debris in the pit lane. John Bizignano is waiting for the 37 car.
Well, John Field is coming around the corner very slowly, trying to make room for the number 12 Ferrari that's coming into his pit area. The back end of the car, oh God, there's oil everywhere. A big hit on the back, right up on the broken exhaust. Someone piled into the back end of this one. Calvin, we're done as far as this Judd goes.
But the number 12 Ferrari is in. It's going to be Kellner's turning it over to the Italian Mimo Schiettarella. And this guy really knows how to put the pedal to the metal. They're hoping that they can just really keep this thing running good and try and get on the podium for the 5th time this season. They've been strong all year. They realize the car doesn't have the horsepower of some of the other cars in the field. They think good strategy can get them to the top 3.
In fact, Mimo Schiettarella drove an Atlantic car here at Trois-Rivieres back in 1993. Take a break and return with more from Canada. Welcome back to Trois-Rivieres, now pitting from 4th place after that first turn spin that dropped him to the back of the pack. This is Claude Bourbonnais, that uniquely designed Lola B2K10 chassis with a Ford V8.
As you say, it's very unique, and it does actually give them a lot of downforce, so it's a very effective car. You can see the loops on top of the front wheel arches, which also suck out air from underneath the body, giving good downforce. And this car has been very effective.
Scott Schubert climbing in. Claude Bourbonnais is one of the legends in the Atlantic Championship, Professional Atlantic Championship. He has 13 career victories, which ties him with the man we talked about at the top of the show, the late Gilles Villeneuve, second only to Mark Dismore, the Racing Northern Light Series star, who is the all-time series leader in wins.
Boy, they're having some trouble with Scott Schubert's belt on there. It seems to take a long time to put the belt on.
It's a bit odd. Schubert did put a bolster in. Claude Bourbonnais is quite tall, but not all that much taller than Scott. Coming up on a minute from this pit stop, and they're going to drop to 5th place as the Risi Ferrari has gone by. Schubert is on his way. His front wheel arches, unique sort of pedestal design. a B2K10 chassis. There's also a B2K40, which is used in the SR2 category. Here's James Weaver, the race leader. He has a pit stop to come, and Butch Leitzinger will take over. Together, Leitzinger and Weaver won the Grand Am round in Lime Rock, Connecticut, Memorial Day weekend. Drives with that sort of head down. It might just be the paint job of the helmet, but it always looks like he's got his chin on his chest.
Oh, I think he does get his head down, but he's driving beautifully at the moment. Long lead there over his immediate pursuer. Number 27 car, no in sight. There's that corner. Caught John Field out a couple of laps ago. James Weaver, you know, I first met him about 14 years ago when he came to Watkins Glen. I was driving in IMSA, and he was asking me all about it. Of course, at the time he was a hot shoe Formula 4, Formula 3 driver, and was wondering about the American scene because Formula 1 has sort of just already started to go by. He probably should have been in Formula 1, but he wasn't. He was a very, very good driver.
Have a cup of coffee in the cart, what is now the FedEx Championship Series, together with his longtime car runner Rob Dyson, returned to sports cars. They have been primary flag wavers. These Riley and Scott chassis, victory after victory, everything from sprint races, 24-hour enduros.
Coming up now to lap, Scott Schubert, who's running in fifth spot at the moment. Scott, of course, had a significant pit stop. Some sort of trouble in the belt.
There's the low one. A couple of cars back, separated by, I believe that's Larry Alberto in that Sports Racer 2 category car. Look at the smoke.
That number 9 car still smoking worse than ever.
American GT car right there, 09 leading that category. The smoke is seriously coming out of the left rear now. Weaver has gotten by Alberto. He will go around under the Road Conway machine. And is he heading for the pit lane? Yes, he is. Race leader is in. Alvin Fish awaits James Weaver. There will be a driver change. Already undoing the belts is Weaver. Let's get down to the Dyson Racing pits and Calvin.
The leader, James Weaver, at 45 miles an hour, comes down pit lane. He's going to be handing over to Butch Leitzinger. They'll do fuel and tires. They're going to stay with the same tire combination, which is a slightly softer compound on the left side, the Goodyear 165, and the slightly harder compound on the right side, the 310. They feel this worked well. It'll probably take Butch a couple of laps to get those 310s up to temperature, but then they'll probably have more durability and really force the issue in the final laps of this race. Now, brakes have been a concern of this team all weekend long. They had the pedal go to the floor in one of the practice sessions. They hope they've got enough cooling to those rotors to really keep it good. Fueling is done. He gets the okay, and Butch takes it back on course.
Great stop there, 28 seconds compared to that poor old Scott Schubert, but in the meantime the 27 car did go by and take the lead.
Have a look at those air restrictors built into the air scoop just behind the driver's head under the roll cage. None in sight. They are buried in the air scoop there on the Doran Lista special, still in the hands of Didier Taze, who has now reassumed the race lead. Let's get back down to Calvin.
I just spoke to the Durand team about when Didier Taze will be pitting and what the fuel window is, and they laughed. They said, forget a window, it's more like a sliding door. This jet will go forever. So they're able to play the caution periods out a little better than the Dyson team. They needed to get past halfway. They've done that with both the 16 and the 20, but we may be a few laps before we see the 27 car in pit lane.
Thank you, Calvin. And the advantage of that fuel strategy and fuel efficiency, of course, is they can keep going under green with the race lead and hope for a yellow flag to carry out their pit stop. See if they get one when we return to Trois-Rivieres. Back at Trois-Rivieres, watching Butch Leitzinger, a former sports car champion, having taken over from James Weaver, trying to run down Didier Taze. Here's Calvin.
Well, James Weaver has turned it over to Butch Leitzinger, but James, looked like you're in a great battle with Didier out there. Traffic, a real issue today.
It was a fantastic battle. The cars were very evenly matched. He had a couple of lucky breaks in traffic, got away. I had a kind of lucky brakes, caught him back again, and then he made a mistake, I think, at turn 8. I could get on the power better, but I think it really comes, the cars are very evenly matched. Except I think the Goodyear's got a better traction, so I can always get off the corner a bit quicker than him.
You said earlier in the weekend brakes were a concern for you guys. You had the pedal go to the floor in practice. Are you confident that you have brakes for the rest of the race?
I was running far too much rear brake to save the front, and when I was behind Didier, I wasn't using the brakes that hard, because obviously in the dirty air, I wasn't cooling them that well. So I was just sort of wobbling along behind him, trying to encourage him to make a mistake, so I could do it the easy way.
Well, he's certainly hoping Butch can get to the checkered flag first and score James' 4th victory of the season and increase his championship lead.
Wobbling along behind him. Not sure what wobbling along means.
Well, you're the racing driver in this team. You've got to tell me.
It's not what I've heard before, but we did see James Weaver locking up his rears 2 or 3 times going to turn 6 earlier on.
Meanwhile, the race leaders in the SR2 category pit, at least in the championship. Larry Alberto out, Ryan Hampton in, and now the leader pits. Didier Days brings the Doran Lista Special in. They will not get the yellow flag they needed. Let's get down to the Doran pits. Once again, here's Calvin.
Didier Tays, fresh off victory at Elkhart Lake, brings it in, hoping to score another victory, this time with a different teammate. It's going to be Canadian Ross Bentley jumping in behind the wheel. Now the advantage for the 27 car by stretching the fuel a little bit longer means that when Ross gets in the car, he doesn't have tyres that are as old at the end of the race. They'll be slightly fresher than both Butch Leitzinger and EFR, so that may give him an advantage. He's not real familiar with this car. He hasn't done a lot of racing recently. Did some races for Tom Milner's BMW team the last couple of years, but not much sports car stuff, so there's going to be a lot of pressure on this Canadian driver.
No question about that. Ross Bentley have to get up to speed very quickly. Butch Leitzinger has gone by to reassume the race lead. Looks like he's going out on sticker tires, so he's going to have to get up the temperature. No tire warmers in the Grand Am.
Of course, that stop was 6 seconds longer than the Weaver Leitzinger stop. That was a good stop. 34 is about what you'd expect to happen in these cars. 28 was a stop. Yeah.
Boulevard du Carmel for the first time. Now back down to Calvin Fish.
Didier, a great battle out there with James. Traffic was an issue, but then he got by you and it seemed like you dropped back just a little bit. Was it traffic or was it tires?
After the yellow, when we went slowly, at the restart, I lost a lot of grip, and I was hoping that grip will come back, but the grip never came back, and I was sliding a lot. That's why I went wide in the 3rd gear corner. James came inside, and I couldn't stay with him because I was sliding 4 wheels. The balance of the car was perfect, but I was sliding a lot.
The fact you're able to stretch your fuel a little bit further, the tyres for Ross will be relatively fresher at the end of this race. Could this be an advantage for you?
I hope so, yes.
Well done, great job today.
Thank you.
All right, thanks very much, boys. There is the Canadian Ross Bentley making his way around, going by the former GTU class leading number 88 Porsche.
Another interesting thing, of course, about this Grand American Road Racing Association is the tremendous plethora of classes, types of car, and of course tyres. We have a huge tyre wall going here. This car here is on Goodyear's, as James mentioned. Goodyear's has good grip. The AT's cars on Yokohama's. We've got Pirellis out there, we've got Michelin's out there, and we've got Dunlops out there. I mean, we've got a lot of tyres out there.
Number 20 Dyson car, sister car to the one we're looking at right there, has also fitted. Only Forbes Robinson is out. John Paul Jr., a former sports car champion in his own right, is behind the wheel. They will be coming forward. Butch Leitzinger now leads Ross Bentley. Same cars, different drivers. Back at Trois-Rivieres, Bob Varsha, David Hobbs, John Visignano, and Calvin Fish with you for the Grand Prix de Trois-Rivieres. This is the battle of the Sports Racer 2 category. Dennis Spencer has taken over from his teammate Rich Grupp, who started that kudzu chassis, number 62. Just behind is the car, the Nissan Lola, formerly driven by Larry Alberto. Now Ryan Hampton has taken over, and right there, Spencer gets sideways.
That's it. Spencer just lost the lead right there, getting very wide going through turn 1. Wow, it still looks pretty squirrely going down to the Corpus. Let's see how the bridge there.
Mazda Kudzu dominated the early laps of this race until that distinct Mazda engine note going by. If you ever needed earmuffs at a race, it's a Mazda.
Yes, they are extremely loud. Here comes the Schiattarella car. 27 car now, right behind him.
Schiattarella in danger of going a lap down. Well, he is a lap down to the race leader, Butch Leitzinger, who's already gone by. Right red number 12 Ferrari was a part of that three-way spin at turn 1 of lap 1. Just haven't been able to break back into the top group of open cockpit sports racers since. Coming up from behind, you see John Paul Jr. having taken over for Elliott Forbes Robinson. That is for position. If he can get to Bentley, that's for second place.
Wow, Bentley really locks him up there, going into 6th of the rear tyres again. Doug Gode's car there, the 09, doesn't seem to be smoking much now, quite.
Blue passing flags being waved.
Bentley slipping back into the clutches now of John Paul Jr. in the 20 car. Schiattarella having a little bit of a break there, not through that traffic.
Now Paul Jr. all over the back of the Doran Lista Special. He can get him when they get down to turn 1 at the end of the start-finish straightaway. Meanwhile, Schiattarella able to pull away just a bit. Calvin Fish is standing by with his teammate.
Ralph Kellner started the number 12 Ferrari, turning it over to Mimo. Ralph, you're involved in that first corner. The 37 came down the inside like a bullet. Give us your perspective on what happened down there.
Well, I only was able to see that he was coming down far too fast, and he was losing the car on the braking because it's very slippery on the inside. And I think he got in contact with the number 8 car. The number 8 car spun. I had to go on the outside, and I was not on all the dirt. And when I put the power down, the car slipped sideways, and I spun. And then I had to wait till the crowd would come by. And I wanted to stay in the middle in the beginning, but because the car spun, I had only one way to go. That was to the outside, and unfortunately, I was so dirty that I spun, and we lost quite a lot of time then.
How does the Ferrari stack up? You're out there in close proximity with the Lola. How does the Ferrari chassis perform? I know you'd like a bit more horsepower, maybe a bigger air restrictor with the car, but how does the chassis still stack up?
Well, as you can see, the Thais car is leading, and that is a Ferrari chassis, so that shows that the Ferrari chassis is still very competitive.
Okay, well, they're still banding around, trying to get a little more horsepower for that Ferrari and try and be more of a factor.
All right, thanks, Calvin. You might want to point out to Ralph Kellner's that, in fact, the Ferrari chassis in the Doran Lista is not leading. It is currently second. Right now, it has gotten by the number 12 Ferrari and smoking the tires, trying to come to grips with the Doran Lista. The hands of Ross Bentley is John Paul Jr. In the second, Riley and Scott Ford from Dyson Racing. We'll take a break and return to Trois-Rivieres. Back at Trois-Rivieres, watching the GTU battle now between Porsche and BMW. Number 81 is Darren Law in a Porsche GT3R. 2 cars back behind one of the American GT machines is the white BMW M3 with Andy Pilgrim now driving. Meanwhile, down in the pit lane, Calvin Fish has Mike Fitzgerald, who started that number 81 Porsche. Let's get down to Calvin.
Mike Fitzgerald has turned the number 81 car over to Darren. You look like you had a good race there going with the 88 early.
Yeah, Andy got in the car second, and I was in there for an hour and a half. It was a pretty tough stint. Andy came up behind me toward the end, and we battled a little bit, but I knew I was coming in, so I didn't want to fight him too hard.
How do you think that Porsche is going to stack up against that BMW? It has ABS, but I understand the ABS has been a bit of a problem for them this afternoon, locking up still. How do you think it's going to go to the checkered flag? Can you score another win?
I think Darren can hold him off. We got a little bit more in the top end, and you can move over on him in the brake zone, so hopefully Darren can block him a little bit.
Okay, well, Mike holds the points lead right now. Actually, Darren and Mike were not teammates at Daytona, gave Mike the points lead, and he's been able to hold on to it all the way through the season.
Thanks, Calvin. One look at Mike Fitzgerald tells you everything you need to know about how hot it is in these cars and how hard the drivers are working.
Well, it's a very warm day. Trois-Rivieres in the province of Quebec, sun shining out of a fierce blue sky, so it's hot in these enclosed GT cars.
Interesting. This GTU battle, G&W Porsche, in the hands of the man you're riding with, Darren Law, is on a 3-race winning streak. The BMW that's chasing him, in the hands of Andy Pilgrim, is looking for its 3rd victory of the year. So it's a championship battle in GTU right now. In fact, it's probably the best class battle on the racetrack at this point. So Scott Schubert go by in that Lola Ford.
By the 10 car.
see onto the Boulevard du Carmel. Look at that sports racer just take off.
Yeah, that was the car of Ross Bentley. You could get a good view coming down that Port de Plessis of just how bumpy it was. You could see out of the windscreen how the GTU car was bucking around, and you could also see how the wind was flapping on the sports racer. You could see it flapping now.
Tremendous speed differentials between the various classes. Look there, John Paul Jr. trying to catch up to the 27 car. That's for second place. Meanwhile, Craig Conway continues to smoke heavily. Let's see if we can get more from Calvin Fish on what their situation is.
When Doug Gold was behind the wheel of that 09 machine coming on this front straightaway, he's completely sideways all the time. I went up and spoke to him after his run. He said, man, that was a handful. The power steering was going in and out, meaning he had it one moment and not the next. So it suddenly locked up when the RPMs dropped on the engine. So a real handful for him. We saw him in early. Problem with the left rear. Looked like a wheel bearing, maybe a wheel bearing seal going on that car. Looks like that problem has actually come back to them. We see it smoking on track right now.
Well, now they're in that situation where they keep their fingers crossed. It was going to break. Why didn't it break early? Now if they have a shot at another victory, it would be all the more disappointing.
Look at this battle that GTU is now. Andy Pilgrim right behind Darren.
Pilgrim has driven plenty of Porsches before, so he probably has a pretty good idea of what that car ahead of him can do in the hands of Darren Law.
Down under the bridge, just under the tyre, getting left down there now, and everybody locks up going through there and spins the inside wheel with that terrific dark line through that Port de Plessis territory at the top here. Houses just immediately to picture left there, suburban houses all there.
Very much in the mold of street circuits. Oh, the 09 has hit the pit lane. Let's learn more once again. Calvin Fish.
Craig Conway has brought the 09 in, smoke pouring from the left rear corner. They were taking the wheel off. It's not a single nut, there's actually 5 studs on that. So they're taking a look inside there. There's a lot of smoke. They're going in with some brake cleaner now to just clean it up back there. There's a lot of oil, a lot of mess. They're going to try and clean it up, evaluate the damage. Now these guys were only intending to do one race this year. They kept on winning, they kept on coming back. They've had 4 wins this year. They're looking for another one today, but it looks like it's going to be tough going from here.
All right, thank you, Calvin. Meanwhile, the battle continues to rage in GTU. The G&W team is owned by a former driver turned team owner by the name of Cole Scroggum. Before the race began, we asked him to assess the strengths of each car.
The BMWs in their previous configuration were restricted for the engine. They were also limited in the transmission choice. Here, they are not. They can run unrestricted engine. They can run different gearboxes. They have very nice suspensions. They're very supple. And they're very good on short, bumpy courses like we have here at Three Rivers. The Porsche's strength is really in its aerodynamics package. It's very good. It has really long legs. It has a great engine. Really high speed, smooth track type of car like Road America.
Trois-Rivieres is nothing like Road America in Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin. There's a look at your top 10. We'll be back to Trois-Rivieres. Welcome back to Trois-Rivieres, where we've had a change in the class leadership in GTU. Andy Pilgrim in the number 50 BMW M3 has gotten by that polka-dotted yellow and black Porsche 911 GT3R of Darren Law, taking over the leadership in that class, running 10th overall in the race. Let's take another look.
And here's what happened. He obviously went through turn 9 and 10, got right up behind him, coming down the long front straightaway, and took the inside into turn 1, used the draft as he went down. It's a good wide turn, so he's got plenty of room on the way in and on the way out if things sort of went wrong a little bit. And then whistled through turn 2 and 3 there, managed to hang on to that lead. You can see him go down the inside now. And there he is. Darren Law gave him room, I've got to say that. Didn't really try and block him too badly, but of course difficult to block there because it's good and wide. And I guess really the key to that was turns 9 and 10. Obviously Andy Pilgrim made a really good job of those 2 turns, tucked right in under the tail of the board, used the draft and threw down the inside of turn 1. Good pass.
On board the 81 with Darren Law, you saw that both drivers were using slightly different lines through those corners. John Bizignano can shed more light on the BMW.
Andy Pilgrim just made that beautiful pass on the Porsche. They've been waiting for this BMW to be operating properly all weekend long. They were having problems with the brakes. They were having some problems with the electrics. But they really thought the superior handling of the BMW would come through on this particular circuit. if they had everything working right. Right now they're very happy. Andy Pilgrim phoned in and said, guys, this is what we've been waiting for 3 days. The car is perfect.
All right, thank you, Biz. We'll see if Andy Pilgrim can pull away with Darren Law. Getting impatient back there behind that American GT machine. He does not want to lose contact with Andy Pilgrim.
The Andy McNeil Kerry hit car.
Look at Pilgrim work that traffic. As is Darren Law. This is a great fight.
That has actually given Andy Pilgrim a bit of breathing space there too, hasn't it? Because Darren Law got held up a couple of times there. That's all he needed, because those bigger engine cars, it's so difficult to overtake the GTU car quicker through the turns probably. But because as soon as they get to any straight bit, those big guys just punch the gas. They're out of luck. Here's the leader for Leitzinger.
Back down to John Bisignano.
Number 62, Cuzzo, back in the pits. They had a very long pit stop when they came in for their fuel and tires. They were definitely checking some other things in the car, but they've seen flame and smoke at the rear of the car. When he came in, there was an awful lot of smoke coming out of the car, which has now cleared. They are going to put him right back out on the track. A lot of fluids on the ground as he leaves.
Well, Biz, the fluid is a bad sign, but it's no surprise that they're having trouble with flames out the back. These Mazdas, as we mentioned earlier, are very loud. A lot of the circuits they race on have noise requirements. They're only allowed to make a certain amount of noise. The Mazda teams have struggled over the years to get those mufflers working well enough without having the baffling material inside get so hot that it catches fire.
John Paul Jr. nearly got trapped there by the 62 car going through turn 2. The 62 car didn't realize he was coming, I guess. He turned in on him.
Back onto the Boulevard Duke Carmel. John Paul Jr. has gotten around Scott Schubot. Great. Back at Trois-Rivieres, a long look up the start-finish straightaway as Ross Bentley in the number 27 Doran Listicar comes through, fully engaged in a battle for second place with John Paul Jr. Number 20, Riley and Scott Lincoln, sponsored by Norcold, Thetford, and Goodyear.
Didier Taze did a good job in that 27 car to begin this race. It looked like he was going to be able to hold off Weaver, but once Weaver got by him, put quite a bit of daylight between before their first pit stop. And then their pit stop, the Didier Taze, Ross Bentley stopped just a little bit longer. And one way and another, they've slipped away, which has allowed John Paul Jr., the second one of Dice's cars, there to come right up and challenge strongly now for second.
Jr. been firmly between his team. You see the Lista logo on the number 27 car. It's named Racing Fans. Makers of industrial cabin trainers you see on a lot of the transporters all over motorsports. The company is owned by a man named Freddie Leinhardt, who has done a lot of sponsorship work with Kevin Doran on this Doran Lista special. And Leinhardt does a lot of driving in this race car as well.
Very often he drives. He drove at Lime Rock Park earlier on this year with Didier. He's not as quick as Didier, but he certainly is enthusiastic and is a good supporter of racing. And, every now and then he likes to have a drive, and he's pretty good, but just not quite as good as somebody like Didier Taze and John Paul Jr.
To watch John Paul Jr. in action, we're hearing word from the pits that the sister car, the race leader number 16, Rich Leitzinger at the controls, is beginning to suffer gearbox problems. Leitzinger is only using about half of his gears. Not a good sign for the race leader.
Those SR2 cars got to be careful. They're not very heavy, and you get trapped between yourself and one of those All-American GTs on the wall. You know he's going to come off.
Spencer at the controls of this Mazda Kudzu suffered a big crash in the Lime Rock round when they were driven into the trackside arm throw. A lot of reconstructive work on that machine. Jim Downing shops in Atlanta. Jim Downing, by the way, is co-inventor of the Hans, H-A-N-S, head and neck safety device that helps stabilize a driver's helmet in the event of an injury to reduce head and neck injuries. That device has come under intensive development with help from Mercedes-Benz and may be made mandatory in Formula One racing in the very near future. Lots of drivers in the kart and NASCAR Winston Cup Series use the Hans device now, developed by Jim Downing and Dr. Bob Hubbard, Michigan State University. John Bisignano has something from the pit lane.
Elliot Forbes Robinson, the car must have been in great shape when you handed it over to John Paul Jr.
Well, actually, the car was as good as it was at the start, John. We had the brakes were right up at the top. The tires lasted the whole way, and everything else was good. So hopefully John Paul can bring it home, and I'm hoping we can still catch Doran's car.
It's going to be close right down to the checker.
No question about that. And John Paul Jr. bouncing around in that car. Man, that's got to be hard work.
Boy, it is hard work. When it gets hot, tremendous amount of steering wheel input in a tight track like this, 1.5 miles, 10 turns, and of course bumpy to boot. It really is a very, very physical, tough race.
So look at the bottom of your screen. First look today at Jack Baldwin, now in the number 74 car that was started by George Robinson. It's Riley and Scott Chassis with a Judd V10 engine. They've been having problems all day. They are now officially 2 laps down. Go back to Butch Leitzinger, the race leading car. Remember, this car may not be healthy. About a 12-second lead, and the laps are winding down. Leitzinger, we are being told, is having to work very hard to keep that car moving.
Well, of course, gearbox trouble here is certainly nothing new. This is the sort of place, a pretty place, happen with transmissions, right through from the transmission lines to the brakes, to the clutches, and to the gears themselves. I mean, they take a terrible pounding.
I mentioned that the laps were winding down. They have wound down to just 1. We got a glimpse of the white flag from the flag stand. 1 lap remaining for Butch Leitzinger. Less than a mile to go. Dennis Spencer up ahead, but no attack from behind. So Butch Leitzinger at this point simply has to get this car to the finish to pick up his 2nd victory of the year with James Weaver.
Well, as long as he's lost a couple of the lower gears and he's got still left with the taller ones, he's okay. That big Ford engine can pull it out of these corners. The trouble is when you get stuck and you lose like 4th and 5th, then you're in big trouble.
Gets to take the top end off the car. And slowing noticeably now is Butch Leitzinger, no doubt, because he knows that the checkered flag is coming out this time around. All he has to do now is coast to the finish. Checkers are out and they wave over Butch Leitzinger from Dyson Racing as he and James Weaver share the victory, and with it, Weaver fattens his lead in the Grand Am Sports Racer Drivers Championship.
You see the gap back to the 37 car, Ross Bentley. It was not very far, so Ross Bentley was making up some good ground there, just not quite enough.
In fact, the final margin of victory, just 4.3 seconds. Butch Leitzinger, Ross Bentley, and John Paul Jr., the only other car on the lead lap, was just over a second behind Bentley at the finish. Here's your GTU class winner, the number 50 of Andy Pilgrim and Rick Fairbanks. Congratulations to them. Leader in GTO and clinching a tie for the Drivers' Championship in GTO, Terry Borcheller and Ron Johnson. Stay with us. Grand Am Road Racing is brought to you by Informix Software, Way to Web, and by the U.S. Army. Be a part of the toughest, smartest Army in the world. Be all you can be. Back at Trois-Rivieres, Butch Leitzinger brings the Dyson Racing Riley and Scott Ford into the pit lane. Fists held high. He and James Weaver have picked up their 2nd victory of the year, taking over the lead from the Doran Lista Special of Didier Tays and Ross Bentley. Terrific drive, terrific team effort. Here's a look at the final results. Sports Racers filling the top 6 positions. Top 3 cars in that group all finishing on the lead lap. Our SR2 winners, Larry Oberto and Ryan Hampton, picking up their 6th victory of the year, while Terry Borcheller and Ron Johnson win the GTO class, Rick Fairbanks and Andy Pilgrim GTU, and Doug Goad and Craig Conway the American GT category. An interesting day of racing all around, beginning with a big spin at the first corner, ending in a Dyson Racing victory. Right now it's time for the victory celebrations to begin. We have a lot of class winners to meet, so let's get down with John Bizignano.
James Weaver, what a fantastic drive up front there. That was some of the closest racing I've seen all season long.
Oh, it was just a fabulous race. I hope everybody watching it enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed driving in it. But I think Butch deserves an enormous amount of credit because he'd actually lost 2nd and 4th gear just after he took over, and he managed to drive around that and still win the race. So, Butch, well done, mate.
Tell us about that, Butch. Oh, how much were your lap times down with those 2 gears out?
Well, for a while they were down a lot because I thought it was only third gear that I had because the whole, all the gates were kind of gone. But then I kind of snuck it in to see if it would go in first gear, and it did. I just didn't have any of the top gears. And, you know, they dropped by a couple seconds, but we were able to, you know, keep it up in the corners. And, you know, James set up a beautiful car, and the team did a great job, so that's where we ended up.
I'll tell you, not to have a bad gearbox around this place. They shift some 2,300 times during a race. It's not the problem to have.
Indeed not, John. And with that victory, Butch Leitzinger will move into the top 10 in points. The Sports Racer 2 category dominated by the number 62 of Rich Grupp and Dennis Spencer until this moment. Larry Oberto and Ryan Hampton took over.
Well, they lost their streak at Elkhart Lake at 5, but they get it going again here. Great job today. Larry Oberto, what about the run?
It was tough. The Mazda, I had a little gap on the Mazda. I was going to slam the door and thought I could be the big loser. So he got the jump at the start, and I've just chased him. We're running like qualifying speeds the first few laps, and they made it tough. They kept us real honest, and that was a long race. I'm hot.
And Ryan, you actually grabbed the lead during the pit stops. Good pit work again by your team, and then you just brought it to the checkered flag. Great strategy, great win.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it was, you know. We knew that if Larry brought the car back in one piece, all I had to do was pretty much drive, and I mean, he's a tremendous driver and made my job extremely easy. So all I had to really do was get a fast pit stop in and just drive consistently, and that's all I had to do, and keep it off the walls, and sure enough, it always comes that way.
The championship is almost in their pocket, but they still have to go to the Glen and score some points.
Thanks, Calvin. In GTO, the Saleen Mustang of Terry Borcheller and Ron Johnson clinched the first championship of the season. Let's get down to John Visignano.
Terry Borcheller, it must have been over 150 degrees in that car. When you got out of it, I've never seen you so pale. I've never seen you so done in.
Except for the last race. It was pretty hot. We knew it was going to be, we knew we were going to struggle with the heat. Coming to a street race, we knew it was going to be even worse. And being as the weather was like it was beautiful, but boy, it was hot. You can see the results of that. I looked about like that.
Well, Ron Johnson, I've got to ask you, I know you want to get some fluids in. You got them all over you, but congratulations on a great win.
Oh, thank you very much. I mean, it was just a great weekend for us all along. No major problems. Crew hung in there, and we just went out and ran a pace, and we just ran everybody down. So,
I'll tell you, 150 degrees don't stop these two.
Indeed not, John. It'll be interesting to see if they try to break that championship tie in the final event of the season. Now to our GTU winners with Calvin.
We talked about that BMW handling around this very tight racetrack, and Rick Fairbanks, your third win of the year, you got to be happy.
Oh, it was a great race. Andy and Darren had a super race at the end. The BMW did great. The Yokohama tires great. We were just, we were hoping for this when this is for our kind of track. We were ready. Andy did a great job.
Andy, you thought the ABS would be a factor here, but you thought you had problems with it as well during the race.
When I got in the car after Rick, there was no ABS. And what I did, I had to recycle it. Plus, I didn't get the seatbelts done right. So at the beginning of the stint, I'm like, uh-oh. The guys passed me and pulled away, and I was fighting the seatbelts. I was trying to do the ABS recycle. I'm like, this is not good. This is not professional, you know? So I got it all done, and then I could start going after them. So we were lucky, you know? We got him with like 10 laps to go. There wasn't a lot of time left. But I got to say thanks to Ray Fairbanks, giving me the shot and, subbing for Billy Oberlin. It's good to win one.
Great battle. We enjoyed watching it.
Thanks.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. Now let's check out the championship situation. There you see the margin for James Weaver over Didier Tays as they get set for one more racing weekend with two full points-paying events, one a sprint, one a 6-hour enduro. Ryan Hampton and Larry Oberto have basically each other to battle, although Rich Grupp and Dennis Spencer are still mathematically in the hunt as the series heads for Watkins Glen in a couple of weeks. Terry Borcheller and Ron Johnson cannot be beaten for the GTO Drivers' Championship, but they could conceivably take to different cars to try to break that tie or go into the record books together. In GTU, Mike Fitzgerald has a slight lead over his teammate Darren Law. That too will be an interesting situation to see play out at the Glen. And in American GT, Andy McNeil leads Doug Mills and Craig Conway tied with Doug Goad.
The winners in American GT with Doug Goad and Craig Conway. Craig, not the easiest of runs. You had to bring in the pits a couple of times. Problems back here in the left corner. What was the issue?
Leaking axle seal in the rear. So obviously we had to be careful trying to make it to the end. I think the X1R and the axle saved it though. It's a hell of a lubricant. I'd just like to thank my crew. We blew a motor here in practice. They changed it in 3 hours and got us back out to qualify second. So the crew deserve most of the credit here. Also, my co-driver Doug Goad did a great job bringing me a good car, and we're real happy to win.
Well, they were struggling with power steering all day long as well, so they battled through it and scored another win, their 5th of the year.
An amazing effort by a team that hadn't planned to run more than one race this year. Here's another look at some of the highlights of today's event. David Hobbs, your final thoughts.
Well, as we can see there from these highlights, it was obviously very, very slippery, but it was a closely fought race right down to the end. Just 4 seconds between these two cars at the end. GTO's a great run for the 5 car there. Poor old John Field didn't have a good day again there, going off at the road, but all in all, I'd say it was a tremendous battle there for the SR lead, the SR2 lead, and the GTU lead. Terrific race there.
Now it's on to the final event of the year, the revival of the 6-hour Enduro at Watkins Glen. Be sure to look for it here on Speed Vision. I'm Bob Barsha for David Hobbs, John Bizignano, and Calvin Fish. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you at the Glen. So long, everyone.